Wildland fire arson. See if you can determine who is the arsonist. Well, who am I to talk about wildland arson? My name is Bruce Balderston. I'm the CEO of Arson Track LLC. I was a senior fire investigator with the Washington Department of Natural Resources and the fire prevention officer investigator for Central Alaska with the Alaska Division of Forestry, Fire and Aviation, and the fire program assistant at the National Park Service in Big Bend National Park, in Texas. And in my career, between being the lead investigator, consultant, or investigation reviewer, I've investigated and reviewed a total of over 1,000 wildfires. And this is the one case that really bothers me. And I entice you to join me in reviewing some of the facts in this case. In this picture, I'm directing the Commissioner of the Department of Natural Resources in Washington near the scene of the fire. You could see the burned steep hillside behind us. As I said, I've investigated over 1,000 wildfires. I've been an expert witness in multiple wildland arson cases, and I'm nationally qualified as a fire investigator, incident commander, helicopter manager, task force leader, and strike team leader. The fire we're going to discuss is the Sleepy Hollow Fire. And my question was the convicted person, the actual perpetrator. And I'm calling this a review and exercise. The Sleepy Hollow Fire occurred in Wenatchee, Washington in 2015. And Wenatchee, Washington is at sort of the center of Washington State, north central area. When and where in Wenatchee? The date was June 28th, 2015. The ignition time was between 2:05 and 2:15 Pacific Standard Time. The ignition location was just off Sleepy Hollow Road, and the location of the ignition was the North Aspect Hill at an elevation of 740 feet. The summary, the first 911 call came in at 14:15:15. In other words, 2:15 in the afternoon and 15 seconds. Total acreage burned, 2,950 acres. The temperature at the time of ignition was 110 degrees Fahrenheit. The relative humidity, the RH, was 16%. The wind was northwest 2 to 6 miles per hour. There was a red flag warning, and the fire danger level was listed as extreme. Total loss of the fire in excess of $100 million. Again, the acres burned were 2,950 acres. 24 homes were destroyed. There were no deaths. There were 2 non-life-threatening injuries. Business property destroyed, and that's where the high number comes from, was the Mickelson Company, massive fruit warehouse, Northwest Wholesale, and Bluebird Inc. Northwest Wholesale and Bluebird were large fruit storage, fruit packing, cooled giant warehouses that burned. The Mickelson Company was a recycling plant that ignited from the Sleepy Hollow fire, which in turn ignited the two other massive warehouses. Devastation of the homes. Some of the homes were 100% losses. And this is an actual photo of some of the homes that burned. Businesses. This is a photo of the recycling plant when it first caught fire. And unfortunately, response to the wildland fire occupied most of the firefighting resources in the region, so it took additional time for outlying resources to reach both the recycling plant and ultimately the fruit warehouses that caught on fire. This is a perimeter of the fire, and you can see the hilly terrain. This is an overview of the general area where the fire started. You can see in the upper left-hand corner Sleepy Hollow Road, and this is the location that we're going to take a look at. Just north of Sleepy Hollow Road, just below it in this screen is the Wenatchee River, and that is going to play a part in the investigation that we're going to look at. Just north of the Wenatchee River, running alongside it here, is Route 2 and Route 97 that merge. Let's talk about the players, as I call them, the people that were involved in the fire to some degree. These are the witnesses that played a crucial role in determining what happened, what time it happened, the people that were involved. Randy was a homeowner. He was closest to the origin. He was a gentleman in his 50s. He was a freelance photographer, very level-headed, very articulate, very organized gentleman. I've spoken with Randy within the last year, even though this happened in 2015. Randy's wife, Lee, the homeowner who was closest to the origin, works at a local accounting firm. There was a rafter on the Wenatchee River, a gentleman by the name of Jacob. And Jacob had been a former Entiat hotshot, had been on many fires over a period of years. One of the people rafting with Jacob was Joshua, who was a local business owner. The vehicles and persons of interest. There's a white pickup truck with black and blue striping that belonged to a gentleman by the name of Jeremy Kindle. He was a former fly fishing guide. There was another white pickup truck that was all white, was owned by Chase, the owner and driver of the vehicle of interest. And then there was a gentleman by the name of Michael, who was the passenger in the vehicle of interest. Regarding technical analysis, John, and I'm using only people's first names, John was the co-director of Film and Video Studies Department at the University of Washington, Ellensburg. The crime lab that was used for evidence analysis was the Washington State Patrol Crime Lab in Seattle, Washington. On the day of the Sleepy Hollow fire, I had just returned home from teaching a fire investigation class at a local college at the state of Washington Department of Natural Resources Fire Academy. I got home about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. It was extremely hot, And I walked into my house and commented to my wife how hot it was, and she said, well, get out of those fire clothes and have a cold beer and sit out on the porch. And I thought, what a great idea. But then my phone rang, and it was Interagency Dispatch Center in Wenatchee, Washington. And they said, we need you to go to the Sleepy Hollow fire. And they proceeded to give me information. And they said, all the roads are blocked. Just flash your badge and they'll let you through. And the local fire department chief will meet you at a pull-off about 2 miles up Sleepy Hollow Road. After I'd finished my initial origin investigation, it was evening, and as I left, I heard Air Attack say words I'll never forget. They said, we are 10 minutes to pumpkin time, which means, for you folks that aren't familiar with helicopters, it means they have to be down on the ground, and they had 10 minutes to go, and they said flames are 6 to 8 feet. The winds were gusting to 25 miles an hour, and they said the fire is moving on the city of Wenatchee. In this slide, I want you to understand where the positioning of the witnesses were and vehicles. The yellow triangles represent people who are rafting, and the triangle to the right, rafters took a photo of the early start of the fire. And at a particular time, if you look at the label that says POI vehicle number 1 in blue, the homeowner sees a vehicle passing him, and we'll go into more detail later. The rafters see a white vehicle parked in the location of the label that says POI vehicle number 2, and just below that is a box and a red dot to the left that shows the origin of the fire. The distance from that vehicle to the homeowner that's observing at the same time, the first vehicle passing his home, is 650 feet. The rafters distance to vehicle number 2 is approximately 850 feet. Now the witnesses, Chase and Michael, that are taking a different route home after swimming in the Wenatchee River, say that they see some smoke, and they wonder why somebody's burning on such a hot day. This is sort of what their route of travel looked like. And in this slide, you see the Wenatchee River, and at the bottom left is the general origin area. And to the very right on your screen, you'll see the approximate location of their vehicle. They said they saw smoke at this point, and at this point, they're about a mile away. And we'll take a look at the terrain in a second. So let's look at some of the background and some of the statements. Chase, who was a person of interest, was the owner and driver of the white pickup. Michael and Chase were acquaintances, not friends, according to Chase. Chase stated that before reaching the pull-off area, Michael, quote, saw a small column of smoke and commented that it was odd that someone was burning on such a hot day. He stated that when we went around the corner in the road, Michael and I saw a fire on the hillside, and I turned into the pull-off area on the north side of Sleepy Hollow Road, directly across from the burning hillside. Chase stated that he told Michael to call 911, but he could not remember if he called before or after he got out of the truck. Chase also said that Michael seemed agitated and paced back and forth, and at some point began to video record on his cell phone. At some point, the fire became so hot that Chase repositioned his truck in the pull-off area further to the west. Chase said that he did not see any vehicles ahead or behind him when he pulled off the road. In reviewing this information using a cognitive memory review with eyes closed, and this took a number of attempts, it was interesting. When I interviewed Chase along with another investigator, I had him close his eyes and I had him walk me through everything from sights, sounds, temperature, before they saw smoke along the road, then when they saw smoke. And he said when he first saw the fire, it was about a foot square and that it started just off the road at a bush. Now, that may not seem very interesting. And I believe in coincidences, but I don't believe in a lot of coincidences regarding the same issue. Well, this was about a week or two after the fire. One of the evidence items that I collected at the point of origin were the remains of a small plant that I would estimate was 10 to 12 inches tall. It was not what I would call a bush, but there was a plant that was the first thing that was ignited that started this fire. Again, think about the size that Chase describes as he first sees the fire. Now, when I questioned Chase about the bush, when he opened his eyes and we talked for a couple of minutes, I started asking him questions about his cognitive remembering of what he saw. I asked him about the bush, and he said he didn't say bush. I reminded him 2 additional times, well, you said that the fire started at a bush and that it was about a foot square. And he said, no, I didn't say bush. And I attempted several times to get more information about this bush. And I do not believe that he was lying to me. I don't think he realized that he said bush, because with cognitive memory review, you're remembering based on visual pictures in your head. You're not thinking about what you're saying. You're looking at the movie, as it were, in your head of what you actually saw. And I think this is the most accurate piece of information that we had. When he saw that fire, as he came around the corner and pulled into the pull-off area, the first thing he saw regarding this fire was that it started at a bush and that it was about a foot square. When we listened to the audio tape that we had made, we recorded the interview, of course, and Chase is heard clearly stating that the fire started just off the edge of the road at a bush. With a photo of the fire, Chase indicated where he first saw the fire. He drew a V pattern and circled the tip of the V and stated that it was the start of the fire. Now, this photo was taken from a video that his passenger took of the fire when it got larger. But he indicated on this photo, with his own hand where the fire started. Now, this is not a very good picture, but you can see in the bottom part of the picture there is a circled black circle, and that is where he said the fire started, and that is absolutely the origin point of the fire, and that's where the small plant remains were collected in what's called a basal lift and put in a sterile metal can to be taken to the crime lab. Now let's talk about Michael. Michael was the passenger in the pickup truck driven by Chase. And shortly after the Sleepy Hollow fire, Michael moved to eastern Washington, to a little town called Ocean Shores. It's about as far away in Washington state as you can get from Wenatchee, Washington. On November 24th, 2015, I investigated or interviewed Michael with Investigator Castle, who was my counterpart in Western Washington, and we interviewed Michael in Ocean Shores, Washington. Michael stated that while driving on Sleepy Hollow Road, he and Chase noticed a column of smoke ahead of them, and they commented to one another that they thought it was odd that someone would be burning. Michael stated that as they drove closer, he had his phone ready to take a photo. As they drove around a curve in the road, they saw a small fire on the hillside. Now, these are Michael's own words. It's very interesting that he did not take a photo of the fire. He also didn't call 911. Michael stated that he called 911. Now, he did call 911, but it wasn't as soon as they pulled over, and we'll get to that a little later. So presented with an 8.5 by 11 photo, the same photo that Chase marked of the early stages of the fire, and we asked him to mark where he saw the fire, he held the marker over the area of the actual origin and hesitated for a couple of seconds and then quickly moved his hand over to the right and quickly circled an area. Michael described the fire size as being about 6 feet long and 3 feet wide, or perhaps a little smaller, as he said. In the Chelan County Sheriff's interview, he described the size of the fire as the size of a pallet. Interesting to note as well that because he had made a video of the fire, the Sheriff's Department never did interview Chase, who had a very different description of the fire size and the location of the fire. This is the area that Michael identified far to the right of Chase's identification of the location of the fire. The following exchange between Michael and investigators took place. I said, "What would you say if I told you we know you set the fire?" Michael's response was, and I quote, "You're full of shit." I said, "Are you saying you did not start the fire?" Michael's response was, "No, I'm saying you're full of shit." Michael said, "I think I'm going to leave." Now, this was a non-custodial interview, so he was free to leave. Michael abruptly stood up, and Investigator Castle shook his hand. I shook his hand and thanked him for his time. During the entire interview, Michael rarely looked at either investigator but focused his gaze on a DVD case, clearly marked Satellite Images, Sleepy Hollow Ignition. Of course, the DVD was blank DVD, but it was marked Satellite Images, Sleepy Hollow Ignition. After Michael departed, Investigator Balderston, that's me, commented to Investigator Castle that Michael's handshake was the wettest handshake he had ever experienced. It doesn't prove anything. I'll leave that to your imagination. Okay, let's look at another person, Jeremy Kindle, who we're calling person of interest 1, was observed driving past the homeowner's residence on June 28th, 2015. This was Randy, the homeowner, and Randy described the vehicle he saw as traveling at normal speed with the window rolled halfway down. Randy was a very detailed person, and he said what caught his attention was that the window was halfway down. Now, Randy and his wife had gone shopping. They were going to have a barbecue that afternoon, and they'd gone to the supermarket, and so they had driven home along Sleepy Hollow Road. They had passed the area that would be very shortly the origin of the fire. There was no activity. There was no one around. They pulled into their driveway, unloaded a few groceries, and as Randy's wife started organizing in the kitchen, he went out and started the barbecue grill that was in the back of the house, and he walked around the house and turned on some sprinklers to water his lawn because it was so hot. That's when he saw Jeremy Kindle's vehicle. But what stuck out to Randy, and he was very explicit with me, he said what caught my attention was not the vehicle, but the fact that the window was halfway down. And he thought, if this driver doesn't have air conditioning, it's so hot, why wouldn't he have the window rolled all the way down? And he thought, if he had air conditioning, why wouldn't he have the window rolled all the way up? I mean, there's no reason to have your window halfway down in that kind of heat. So Jeremy Kindle was suffering from psychiatric episodes during which he was classified as delusional. He believed that the mental health professionals were controlling his thoughts and body. Prior to June 28, 2015, the day of the fire, he was caught speeding at over 100 miles an hour, and he had discharged a weapon in his residence, damaging a ceiling. The Sheriff's Department and State Patrol searched for several months without success for his vehicle, described by Randy, the homeowner, and observed on an outdoor video camera further down Sleepy Hollow Road. They could not find this vehicle, and they didn't have a license plate number, so they didn't know who was driving the vehicle. So let's talk about the witness, Randy. He returned home from the grocery store, as I said, passing the hillside, he estimated at about 2 o'clock. He arrived home and turned on the barbecue. He started the lawn sprinklers, and as he was on the west side of his house, he observed a white pickup traveling west at normal speed, and that would be Jeremy Kindle's car. As he turned in front of his house, he saw, and I quote, "fire on the hillside with smoke and flames of about 6 to 8 feet in height." He also stated that he saw another white pickup truck in the pull-off area across from the burning hill. There he saw 2 young men by this pickup truck, and they appeared to be calling 911. He assumed this because he saw one of the men holding a phone in front of himself. Randy ran to his back door, entered the house, and called 911. His call was received at Rivercom 911 at 2:15 and 15 seconds. Lee's wife, we're calling homeowner 2. After Randy called 911, Lee made her way to the pull-off area on the north side of Sleepy Hollow Road. Lee gave a detailed description of the two young men to investigators. She stated, and I quote, "When a Washington State Patrol vehicle arrived at the scene, I heard one of the young men say to the other that WSP had arrived and they should leave." Interesting, because they have a video of the fire. They saw the fire when it was a foot square by one account, or the size of a pallet according to another account. It was later confirmed that even though the two young men were the first to see the fire, neither of them made contact with firefighters, the Chelan County Sheriff's Office deputies, or the Washington State Patrol trooper, all of who arrived on scene prior to the men leaving the area. Let's talk about the rafters. I had a call from a County Sheriff's Department officer by the name of Officer Mowens, and he contacted me informing me that he had a witness to the start of the fire that wanted to meet me. So I met the witness, Jacob, and Officer Mowens on May 29th at Sleepy Hollow Road pull-off. Jacob, who was a former U.S. Forest Service ENIAD hotshot crew member, was floating on the Wenatchee River the day of the fire with a group of friends. At the scene, Jacob demonstrated to Investigator Balderston, that's me, and Chelan County Sheriff's Office Deputy Mowens, where he saw the white pickup pull in and park. He explained where he believed the smoke and flames had originated and where the pickup truck moved from its original position. Okay, this is a terrible copy from the fire investigation, but it shows me on the extreme right of the, I'm sorry, that's Officer Mowens, and the hotshot crew member is across the road, and I'm taking the photograph, and he pointed to where he believed the fire had started. And he said he observed a white pickup truck pull into the parking area above the river on Sleepy Hollow Road. He stated that the passenger got out of the vehicle and walked across the road, disappearing from his sight. Jacob said that it appeared that when the person returned to the vehicle, smoke and a small fire were visible. He stated that the passenger was holding a phone in front of himself as if taking photographs. He added that the pickup truck was repositioned within a couple of minutes, slightly to the west. Again, copied from the fire investigation report. I apologize, the copy is terrible. This was a photograph that was taken, and you can see smoke in sort of the center right of the screen. You can see the rafters. But Joshua stated that several people in the group saw smoke and then fire. Joshua was the last person in the flotilla, and he was able to paddle out of the current and retrieve his cellular phone in order to take a photograph. He took a still photo as well as a short video clip of the fire. He said that he did see a white pickup truck, but he was focused on taking a photo. He did call 911 to report the fire and subsequent 911 call to report the sighting of the white pickup truck. Now you can see the steepness of this hillside. I'm standing with the commissioner of the Department of Natural Resources. This was the day after the fire. And about halfway up my left side, the right side of the screen, you can see just off the side of the road what appears to be a light tan rock. It was about the size of a softball. Just to the very left of that is where the fire started, and that's where I collected what I believe was a small plant in a basal cell lift the day of the fire. Okay, let's look at a timeline. So starting at 2 p.m. on the day of the fire, Randy and Lee, the homeowners, passed the general origin area. Between 2:13 and 2:14, the rafters see a white pickup truck, then smoke, followed by fire. At somewhere between 2:13:37 and 2:14:03, Mr. Kendall leaves and passes the general origin area. At 2:14:20 to 2:14:30, Randy, the homeowner, sees the white pickup, Mr. Kendall's pickup, pass in front of his home and sees fire with 6 to 8 foot flames and a pickup with 2 individuals in the pull-off area with 1 individual holding a phone in front of him. At 2:15:17, Randy, the homeowner, connects with 911 to report the fire. At 2:15:57, about 40 seconds later, Michael, one of the people in the pull-off area, connects with 911 to report the fire. So you recall I mentioned about coincidences or inconsistencies, which we'll talk about a little bit. But Michael said that when he first sees the fire, it's about the size of a pallet. His driver, if you will, said it was about a foot square, but he doesn't call 911 right away. He's taking pictures and doing a video. So by the time Michael calls 911, Randy has already reached 911 ahead of him and describes the fire being 6 to 8 feet tall. At about 2:17, Rafter starts to video the fire, and the video shows a white pickup in the repositioned location just west of the original position. At 2:17, which is the timestamp on Michael's video, is the time that he actually started taking the video. The rafter Joshua calls 911 at 2:17 as well, and Joshua's second call to 911 to report the white pickup truck occurred at 2:29:42. Facts related to vehicle movement and fire size. The vehicle seen by the homeowner Randy described as traveling at normal speed. Okay, so the distance from the general origin area to the point of observation by Randy is exactly 650 feet, 0.12 miles. So time estimates. If the gentleman that was driving that truck, Jeremy, was driving at 10 miles an hour, which what I would say is slower than normal speed, it would have taken him 43 seconds to get from the general origin area to Randy's location. If he was traveling again at 15 miles an hour, you can see the time, but speed limit there was 30 or 35 miles an hour. Let's say he was traveling at 20 miles an hour, which is slower than normal, but that's possible. It had taken him 21 seconds. Okay, so somewhere between 17 and 30 seconds was the time it took. So if Jeremy Kindle had set the fire, it means he would have had to park his truck, walk across the road, set the fire, walk back to his truck, could have sat there for 10 seconds, 30 seconds, who knows, and then drove an additional, 17 to 28 seconds to past Randy's house. Okay, but how did the other two people not see anyone on the road, but they saw the fire as very small? But Randy sees a fire, and he's a professional photographer, so I pretty much trust his eye, that the flames were 6 to 8 feet tall. That means that somehow, to my way of thinking, Jeremy Kindle, if he set the fire, he must have disappeared, been hiding somewhere in this 600 feet and waited till the fire got large. But wait a minute, the other two people said the fire was very small. So something doesn't add up here. Facts related to vehicle movement and fire size. Approximately 10 to 20 seconds after Randy sees the pickup pass in front of him, he sees 6 to 8 foot flames on the hillside and sees another white pickup truck in the pull-off area, and described two people outside of the truck, one holding a phone in front of himself. Time is approximately 2:14:30. The two people seen by Randy are Chase and Michael, of course. Chase described the fire as 1 foot square, while Michael described it as about the size of a pallet. So if the fire was that size when they first saw it, but they didn't see anybody there, how did the fire grow in size, but the person that potentially set the fire hadn't left the area yet? Where was he? At 2:17, the rafter begins video recording the fire, which shows the already repositioned pickup truck in the pull-off area. Michael's video is also time-stamped at 2:17. So let's look at this picture again, just so it's clear in your mind that you have the rafters, who are the yellow triangles. You've got the person of interest, or the vehicle of interest, the blue rectangle here at Randy's home, and Randy sees the vehicle, and then a few seconds later turns and sees the fire down the road and sees the people positioned across from the fire. So this is a still taken from the video that Michael took. Now, I'm no whiz-bang with technology, so I actually took the copy of the video that I received from the Chelan County Sheriff's Department, and I found John Ward, who did a video analysis. John was ran the film school at the University of Washington in Ellensburg, Washington. The video was recorded on June 28th, 2015, the day of the fire. John made the following analysis, and he ran it through several analysis tools that he had. Segments of the video were missing. We don't know if that's because of the Sheriff's Department copying the video or something that Michael did to the video. The video does begin at 2:17 p.m. John stated that sections of the video sounded rehearsed, and the dialogue sounds as if it were for an audience, not a normal conversation between two people. And I firmly agreed with that. John Ward used to work for the U.S. State Department, analyzing video and recorded conversations for the State Department. In the video, which I don't have a copy of now, there was concern. They talked about it. Well, the fire could have been smoking, and that's why we have the video. That was an interesting part, according to John. The other thing I want to comment on is there was a conversation between Michael and Chase, where Chase, the driver of the vehicle, said, "You know, they're going to think we set the fire." And Michael clearly says, and I quote, I'll never forget this, "No, dude, that's why we have the video." Well, interesting, because they didn't start taking the video for a fair amount of time from when they first arrived at the scene. So let's talk about some physical evidence. First evidence item that I found in the general origin area was a cigarette butt, and when collected, the item was located 9 feet 2 inches east of the point of origin. While the weathering on the item would tend to exclude it from being an ignition source, it was collected and tested. Now, to this day, I don't believe that had anything to do with the fire, but it was collected because it was there. Evidence item B was a cigarette butt. This item was a cigarette filter with 3/4 of an inch of cigarette white paper remaining. The entire edge of the paper had its edge burned, though there was no tobacco remaining in the tube. This item did not appear to have been exposed to any weathering. This item was located 7 feet 9 inches east of the point of origin. I don't want to get too involved in this. I have a theory about this, that whoever set the fire tried to light it with a cigarette. They may have broken the cigarette sort of in half, lit it, and tried to light the fire with it. The cigarette butt, I'm not a smoker, but the cigarette butt had no discoloration that you could see, as if it had never been smoked, although the paper around just beyond the filter was all black. I was able to purchase a pack of cigarettes of the same brand. It was a Turkish something or other, and I did some tests. Again, not being a smoker, I took some puffs on a number of cigarettes, and you could puff the cigarette one time, draw a breath in one time, and there was no staining on the filter. If you pulled in air, took a second puff, it stained. I thought that was quite interesting. So whoever had that item in their mouth, they puffed on it one time to burn that paper. And the reason I know this is because under a blue light, staining did appear. To the naked eye, it looked pristine, but under a blue light, there was staining, which means someone took a puff. So obviously that was given to the crime lab. So the cigarette brand was a Camel Turkish domestic blend. The filter showed no visible signs of being smoked under ultraviolet. However, some filter staining was observed. To establish how much smoking with so little staining would occur, a test was carried out. I've already gone through that. So additional tests were undertaken to place a cigarette near the general origin area by driving 10, 20, and 30 miles an hour by both driver and passenger. None of the tests were successful. The Sheriff's Department also did some similar tests. Driving at any speed, you could not throw a cigarette out of a car and have it land as close as this partial cigarette was to the origin area. A continuous burn test was conducted at a temperature of 55 to 60 degrees, because this was months after the original fire, with a relative humidity of 50%, and this brand continued to burn until it reached the filter. So it did not self-extinguish. So the road configuration at the point of origin may be hard to see in this, but to the left, in the left photo, in the upper left hand, you have the hard surface. To the right, you have a shoulder that's gravel, and then a drainage ditch to the right of that. In the right-hand photo, the red area denotes the point of origin. Crime lab results, there was not enough DNA to get a full panel test. It was determined that the cigarette butt that didn't appear to have any staining came back to being a male. So this is the can that was used, and in the left photo you see that rock that was actually split. That's where the basal cell lift of the plant material was. And it came back that was organic material. There was no accelerant present. So, talk about evidence. How do we proceed? Here's one of the warehouses that's on fire from the Sleepy Hollow fire. Statement and evidence inconsistencies and questions. Let's start with the persons of interest, Chase and Michael. Both stated they saw smoke as they drove west along Sleepy Hollow Road. Chase identified the fire as being 1 foot square, while Michael said the fire was about the size of a pallet. I don't believe that in either case these gentlemen would have seen smoke at the location along the road where they said they saw smoke, because of the change in elevation and blocking the view with the height of that hill. The location from which they first saw smoke was 1/2 to 3/4 of a mile from the general origin area, and from there to the general origin area at 30 miles an hour, travel time to first see the fire would be 45 to 60 seconds. Neither sees a vehicle in front or in back of them as they pull into the pull-off area. And for the size of the fire they described, as they parked in the pull-off area, they should have observed the white pickup observed by Randy. The homeowner, Randy, sees a vehicle pass in front of his house with the vehicle's driver's side window rolled halfway down. Within 10 to 20 seconds, he sees 6 to 8 foot flames on the hillside. Rafter number 1 sees a white pickup pull into the pull-off area with the passenger exiting the vehicle, and shortly thereafter sees smoke and then fire. If Chase and Michael could observe smoke from 1/2 to 3/4 of a mile from the general origin area, how could the river rafter not see smoke until he sees Chase and Michael's vehicle pull into the pull-off area, with Michael exiting the vehicle, disappearing from sight, and then reappearing? How can River Rafter 1 not see smoke, then see smoke and fire, but when homeowner 1 sees the vehicle pass his house, the fire's 6 to 8 foot flames, and the white pickup with Chase and Michael is in the pull-off area? Some of the damage done by the Sleepy Hollow fire. Which statements are contradictory? Okay, Michael and Chase see smoke while driving towards the general origin area at a half to 3/4 of a mile away. Chase describes the fire as 1 foot square and states the fire started at a bush just off the road. Michael describes the fire as about the size of a pallet, maybe a bit smaller. Michael and Chase state that no vehicles ahead or behind them when they first see the fire. Homeowner Randy sees the white pickup truck with stripes pass in front of his house, 650 feet from the GOA, and then turns to see 6 to 8 foot flames and a white pickup truck with a young man holding a phone in front of him. Randy contacts 911 at 2:15 and 17 seconds, and 40 seconds later, Michael's call to 911 is recorded. So Randy sees Michael with his phone, assumes he's called 911, but Randy now has to run around to the back of his house, go into the kitchen, get the phone, call 911, report the fire, and Michael still hasn't called 911. Jacob, the river rafter, sees a white pickup truck pull into the pull-off area and sees the passenger exit the vehicle, moves out of sight. The passenger then returns to the vehicle. Then Jacob sees smoke, followed by fire. Joshua, the river rafter, takes a photo and video of the fire and reaches 911 at 2:17. In Joshua's first photo, the white pickup is seen in its repositioned location at the east end of the pullout. Joshua, the rafter, calls 911 a second time to report the white pickup at 2:29:42. And I believe I said this earlier, that in Michael's video, Chase says, "You know, they will think we started the fire," and Michael replies, "No, dude, that's why we have the video." And that seemed to work, because the sheriff's department said, no, they couldn't have set the fire. They have a video of the fire. Okay. The homeowner, Lee, stated that upon arriving at the pull-off area, she hears one of the young men, Michael or Chase, that the state patrol had arrived and that they should leave the area. All right, so who ignited the Sleepy Hollow fire? This is Mr. Jeremy Kendall. Jeremy Kendall's confession and conviction. Suffering from a delusional episode, Jeremy Kendall tells Chelan County Sheriff's Department deputies that as long as he was in their office, he might as well tell them that he started the Sleepy Hollow fire. He said that he used a Bic lighter and set some grass on fire on the hillside where the fire started. What happened was the Sheriff's Department was not successful in tracking down Jeremy Kendall until he arrived for mental health assistance at a county office that was adjacent to the sheriff's office. The person that Mr. Kendall spoke with, begging for help, was so concerned about him that they called the sheriff's department and explained that they had a significantly distraught gentleman that had just left their office and they were worried about him. So a sheriff's deputy went out into the parking lot, which they shared with the mental health facility, and the only person moving in the parking lot was Mr. Kendall, just as he arrived at his pickup truck, and the deputy recognized that this is the pickup truck we've been searching for months. So he asked Mr. Kendall to come to the sheriff's department and get a cold drink. So they went inside and had a conversation. So as of February 2018, Mr. Kendall had not been arraigned because of a delusional disorder that prevents him from understanding his situation or assessing in his defense. This is a statement by the judge. He was found competent to stand trial 27 months after his arrest and ordered to pay $10.1 million in restitution. Mr. Kendall was convicted of first-degree arson with a 27-month prison sentence and 18 additional months of supervision. So let's look at the conviction evidence. Jeremy Kendall's truck was described by homeowner Randy just before seeing flames of 6 to 8 feet in size on the hillside and the second white pickup in the pull-off area. Mr. Kendall's truck was viewed on a video camera in Kashmir, Washington, shortly after the start of the fire. Mr. Kendall was a smoker and presumably had a lighter with him on the day of the fire. Mr. Kendall confessed to the ignition of the fire. Mr. Kendall told Chelan County Sheriff's Office deputies that he stopped in the pull-out area, walked over to the hill, and with a Bic lighter set grass on fire. Let's talk about the validity of evidence against Mr. Kendall. Mr. Kendall was charged and convicted of arson in the first degree based on the following evidence. He drove east on Sleepy Hollow Road at the time of the ignition of the Sleepy Hollow fire. He was a smoker and presumably had a lighter with him on the day of the fire. And he knew that the fire started on the hillside on Sleepy Hollow Road opposite the pull-off area. He confessed to igniting the fire during a delusional episode. Is it possible that Mr. Kendall sets the fire, returns to his truck and watches the fire, then drives for 17 to 43 seconds before homeowner Randy sees him and then sees 6 foot to 8 foot flames? At the same time, Michael and Chase are on the scene and see the fire when it was a foot square or the size of a pallet and identify that it was started at a bush. During this short period of time, Rafter Jacob sees a white pickup truck pull over on the road above the river, sees the passenger disappear and return, followed by smoke, then fire. Problems with the conviction evidence. The common statement that Mr. Kendall walked into the Chelan County Sheriff's Department and confessed to the crime is misleading. The lead detective, Jay Mathena, told me that Mr. Kendall had visited the mental health clinic near the Sheriff's Department. Mr. Kendall appeared to the contact at the clinic that he was in a dire delusional state and he was pleading for help. Contact at the clinic was so concerned with Kendall's condition that they contacted the Sheriff's Department. A law enforcement officer, aided by a description of Mr. Kendall, met him in the parking lot at his vehicle. Recognizing that the vehicle fit the description of the truck that the Sheriff's Office had been searching for several months, the law enforcement officer suggested to Kendall that he accompany the Sheriff's Office deputy to the Sheriff's Office. In the Sheriff's Office, Mr. Kendall stated that he had started the Sleepy Hollow fire. He said, "As long as I'm here, I might as well tell you I set that big fire." That's an exact quote. Superior Court Judge Leslie Allen on Wednesday accepted a psychologist finding that Kendall is not competent to understand the first-degree arson charge against him or assist Public Defender Keith Howard in handling his case. She ordered Kendall to spend up to 90 days in Eastern State Hospital, where therapists may try to restore him to competency. Howard said that last week Kendall is deeply mentally ill and noted the evidence gathered in the fire investigation may not conclusively point to arson. Investigators for the State Department of Natural Resources have said they couldn't eliminate sparks or heat from a vehicle as a cause of the fire, but their conclusions lean towards arson. That would be me. I'm not going to get into NFPA 921, but who was Jeremy Kendall? Jeremy Kendall was a 37-year-old, well-respected fly fishing guide in Wenatchee, Washington. Mr. Kendall had shown signs of mental distress before and after the fire. Let's talk about false confessions. So the judge says this gentleman is not competent to know what he's saying. He can't aid in his defense, but he confessed. So false confessions in criminal cases are the result of mental illness and or extreme pressure by law enforcement. And I'm not saying in any manner that law enforcement did anything inappropriate. That I am not saying. I want to be clear about that. I'm focusing on the mental illness issue. So the Innocence Project, 25% of their exonerated cases involved false confessions. So 365 cases were exonerated as of January 2020. These were cases where the people were convicted of crimes where they had confessed, but they weren't guilty. Some examples of false confession cases are the Jean-Benet Ramsey case in 1996. 6 people confessed to her killing. All 6 were determined to be false confessions. The famous New York City jogger case in 1989, 5 young men confessed to the rape and beating of a female jogger. All 5 spent 5 to 9 years in prison before the actual perpetrator was identified and confirmed through DNA. Harvey Lee Lucas in 1983, the most prolific serial killer in history, confessed to over 600 murders across the United States. He was convicted of 3 murders of family members and cleared of all the others. So, talk about my opinions of who set the Sleepy Hollow fire. Jeremy Kendall was seen passing the homeowner's house in a white pickup truck with stripes. Chase was the owner and driver of the white pickup in the pull-off spot. Michael, the passenger in Chase's pickup, and filmed the fire. An unknown party or an undecided party? Well, I think you've figured out what I think. I'd like to hear what you think. So please choose Jeremy, the gentleman that confessed to the fire setting, Chase, the driver of the vehicle, Michael, the passenger in the vehicle, or was it an unknown party, or do you remain undecided? You can register your opinion, and I'd love to hear from you, and I would be happy to share with you what I think really happened. You can share it on my YouTube channel, or you can email me at contact@arsontrack.com, or you can send me a message via LinkedIn. Thank you for your time.